All right, so welcome once more to the 2026 Brook-Myers Institute Sustainability Showcase. As you'll see, this year we're focusing on resilience again with the title From Big Bets to Local Solutions, Tech's Role in Resilience. Over the next 2 days, we're going to explore one of the most important questions of today. How do we strengthen the resilience of ecosystems? How do we strengthen the resilience of communities, both rural and urban, of critical infrastructure like energy and transportation systems, and the supply chains and the local economies that power them? We're fortunate to bring together researchers, practitioners, and community members who work on these issues at every scale, from understanding microbial processes in coastal ecosystems, Joel sitting right there, for example, to modeling wildfire risk across entire regions. Xiao Liu somewhere here is working on that. From developing cutting-edge AI tools to implementing community-based solutions on the ground, as our SCORE team is working with many of you to do. My hope is that we leave here not just inspired, but also with a lot of momentum. Georgia Tech already has many centers and research groups doing excellent work on resilience. We have excellent courses touching every aspect of resilience. Our Office of Sustainability is working on our resilience plan and has a lot of momentum too. So I see Brook-Myers Institute's role as helping catalyze a unified vision for Georgia Tech in resilience, to connect the dots across our campus and forge high-impact partnerships with the civic sector, with industry, and funders who share this commitment. So the way that I see it is that these 2 days are just the beginning, and we will have a 2-month process that builds on this. What we hope to do is building on what we learn here to develop a unified vision and ambitious initiatives that can attract the resources and the partnerships that this work, this important work, deserves. And I'm particularly excited that President Emeritus Clough is with us today to share his vision for wildlife management and resilience in Georgia. His leadership has always embodied this spirit of ambitious thinking grounded in real-world impact. So for those of you who are newer to Georgia Tech, let me offer a brief introduction to Dr. Clough. He hails from Coffee County in Georgia and is a double jacket in civil and environmental engineering. He served as Georgia Tech president from 1994 to 2008, a 14-year tenure. That must have been quite a marathon. During his tenure, the campus, talking of marathons, the campus hosted the 1996 Olympic Village, and the campus infrastructure was vastly transformed for the better. The visioning for the Eco Commons, the adoption of LEED construction standards, the creation of Tech Square are all from that era. On the academic and research side, Georgia Tech became a top 10 public university during his tenure. And the visioning for Georgia Tech's leadership in sustainability, energy, and biomedical innovation also happened under Dr. Clough's leadership. We owe the existence of the Brook-Myers Institute, the Strategic Energy Institute, and the Georgia Tech Emory Alliance in biomedical engineering to his transformative leadership. So thank you, Dr. Clough, for everything that you have contributed that has had such lasting contributions. So today, Dr. Clough continues to write, lecture on climate change, and support student access through the Georgia Tech Promise program. He has completed a new book, The Ever-Changing Georgia Coast, A Natural History of Its Creation, Transformation, and Future, now in the process of publication by Smithsonian Books. Today's talk draws on the work that went into this book and his vision for Georgia's future in wildlife management. Thank you.
Thank you, Beryl.
Please welcome me and
Can everybody hear me okay? I need that. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to make remarks about a subject that's close to my heart. And it's great to see all of you here. We had a group a meeting down at Jekyll Island that the Department of Natural Resources put on a big conference about resilience, and there were about 400 people there, and I got a chance to speak to that group, and afterwards we got together, everyone, like Joel, everybody with Georgia Tech connection. I was amazed. I didn't know there were that many people at Georgia Tech working on these topics, and it's a wonderful thing to see, so I'm very proud of you. Okay, so as Beryl mentioned, I was born in a small town in South Georgia, and I was raised there. And my parents worked hard. They didn't have much money, but they both worked in their business. And what that meant for me as a kid is I didn't have any supervision. A little bit dangerous. But I lived in a small community, and I had relatives who lived on farms, and I spent my life in nature. Swamps, pine barrens, you name it. I could reach everything I wanted to reach by bicycle, or I could jump in rivers, blackwater rivers, and people worry about snakes. Well, you jump in and make a big splash, and the snakes go away. So I grew up with this love for nature just by that basis. I came to Georgia Tech, and I got a degree in civil engineering, correct, but was fundamentally, I was very focused on geology. I took everything I could get in geology. Eventually, I went to Berkeley, and I majored in geological engineering. So geology is a big part, and understanding nature and what makes it work and what makes it tick. And that was the way I spent my life. And even in my engineering work, a lot of it was about how to work with nature. And I got involved with the Katrina effort. After Katrina, I was asked to chair a panel. I learned a lot about nature and natural history. I was an earthquake engineer, traveled all over the world. So my life has been tied to the land and tied to this idea, but not so much directly involved with conservation until I was secretary of the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian does a lot of work in this area all over the world. The Smithsonian Biological Institute does save conservation species all over the world, endangered species. So that's a little bit about why I'm passionate about this subject. I retired from the Smithsonian, came back, and I was asked to participate in programs along the coast and make Chautauquas and discussions. And I met people like Christy Lambert, who's here, who have given their lives to help save the Georgia coast in different ways. Some people are concerned about turtles. Some people are concerned about marine mammals. Some people are concerned about snakes, yeah, and trees and so forth, and islands and personal land. I was sort of interested in the big picture, how it all came together and how I might contribute in some way. And so eventually I thought about writing a book. And I spent a week at the Smithsonian, which I often do, to see the collections. And always you find things there that tell you about time, okay? Because if you look at something that's 55 million years old, you start thinking, well, that was a long time ago. Rather than just thinking about what's going on today, which we tend to get consumed by. At any rate, I became interested in writing a book. In some way I could contribute. There are a lot of books about the coast. But I figured I could write a book that would talk about time, speak to time over long-term and short-term. I could write a book that would speak about the coast of Georgia as I saw it as a child and is the way it truly is as the coastal plain, which owns the coastal seacoast. The coastal plain also owns all the previous seacoast of Georgia. So it really is a historical storyteller of the coast of Georgia. And then I thought I could also bring to the concept, there are a lot of people who focus on physiographical kind of things, the land and the landforms, but when glaciers come through, what happens to the animals, right? So I thought I could talk about species, all the land life forms. How does all that come together? So that's really what I tried to do, sort of like jumping off a cliff into the deep water, but I survived, I think. I had a wonderful time doing it, and Buddy Loffman, my wife, helped me with this photo of Little Tybee Island. It's one of the northernmost islands that's protected. The next one up is Tybee, which is, I was just there, we stayed on Tybee. It's a publicly accessed beach, which is a wonderful place. But Little Tybee is what you see as a typical barrier island. It's a very young island. It's what they call a Holocene. It's created in the last 5,000 years. Very delicate. It gets pummeled by the sea and the water's coming in from the backside. Georgia has very large tides. People don't believe that. But because of the shape of Georgia, the tides funnel in. It gets up to 10 feet twice a day. There's a lot of flushing activity that goes on. It catches people by surprise who wait out in places and realize, whoops, the way back is gone. You have to be careful when you do that. So there's a lot, so the point is change, right? This is change happening every day. That's the way it is on the Georgia coast. Change happens every day. Now, another part of this change is if you are out there and up in the top part of, that's the back river, there are big sandbars up there. They're submerged, but at low tide, you can see them. And guess who else sees them? Birds. And they know that there are nutrients there. And you see thousands of birds come in, especially when they're migrating. So every day, this is a very dynamic environment that's changing. A little bit about those, just an introduction for you. This is an older slide that gives a general idea about the coast, the seacoast that we know it today. So barrier islands are these islands that line themselves along the coast. They are sand dunes, and then they grow into little islands. And Georgia has 14 of them that have seacoast. Now, it has other islands that are sort of abandoned islands that don't have seashore anymore. And they have different ages, and they were all formed at different times, and that's part of the dynamism of the coast. I won't go back. There are other islands that have been abandoned further back. They go back 2 million years. So if you look at these islands, you'll see the yellow is called Holocene. That's a technical geological term, but it really means Holocene period in geological terms is only 12,000 years old. It's really recent, right? So these islands formed about 5,000 years ago when sea level rise and change paused. Now, what was going on? Why was sea level going up and down, right? Humans were not a big factor at that time. But what's happening was sea level changes all the time. And sea level has changed, generally speaking. I won't go through that. I'll say it in a minute later. But in the short term, what was going on was there was a big glacier coming down, bearing down on Georgia, the Wisconsin Glacier. And it didn't get here, but its effects were enormous because it sucked up so much water, sea level fell 400 feet, right? And so as sea level was falling, it would pause, and when it paused, it would form barrier islands. So you have different sets of barrier islands all the way down while sea level is generally falling and stopping and falling, stopping, falling. Now, sea level didn't quit falling. So the islands that we see here that are in this purple were formed in what's called the Pleistocene. Pleistocene actually is 2 million years to the Holocene. But those islands were formed about 50,000 years ago. They really are Silver Bluff is the better name for them. And so, because the island, the beach, the barrier islands behind them, the green, were formed about 70,000 years ago. They're also Pleistocene. Those islands were formed as sea level was dropping. But sea level didn't quit dropping. It went down 400 feet. And the coast of Georgia moved 80 miles out into the east. So the coast of Georgia was way out here. And as it began, the glacier began to melt 50,000 years ago, it started sea level coming up. And guess what? It kept coming up. And 5,000 years ago, it paused. And that pause led to these yellow islands. They happened to be right close to the Silver Bluffs, and winds pushed them back. They combined to create the islands we see today, which have 2 ages, okay? Some of which, if you look way up here, like Wassaw and Little Tybee, are only 5,000 years old. If you come down to Cumberland, they're probably 70,000 years old. So that's a little bit about time. So that's another time dimension. It's thousands of years, right? Not daily, but thousands of years. Time. All right. I've got this geology thing in me, right? So no test here. This is just going to be me telling you a little bit. So don't try to remember all these names. But here's the deal. This is 66 million years of history. Why 66 million years of history? Because a big meteorite hit the Earth about 66 million years ago, killed off all the dinosaurs. So a lot of little creatures that were scurrying around called mammals could get bigger, us, right? So then humans, not humans, but animals started coming around, right? But in Georgia, where the coast was just beginning to form, the coast was actually in Macon. And the rest of Georgia was underwater, where I grew up. In South Georgia was. And it was underwater for about 30 million years. So if you look at this chart, move up 30 million years, you get into the Miocene. That's when things begin to become land-based. So enough of the sea level had fallen, land began to emerge. Boop, 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 over time. And then you come up on this thing called Pleistocene. Pleistocene is an important thing. It's called an ice age. Ages, you know, you think of me a little bit older. Ice age sounds static, but it was not static. It had 25 glacial advances and retreats. Why? Because South America and North America had combined 50-mile little thing called the Isthmus of Panama, and the Gulf Stream no longer went to the Pacific. It went up and took all those moist, warm things to the Arctic, and you had vast amounts of snow. 25, that's a lot. So it was a very dynamic period, and sea level was going up and down in Georgia with every one of those things. Can you imagine that? What are the animals doing? You know, it's just getting settled in. So, whoa, here it comes again. I got to go up here. I got to run back down there. So it has a big effect on everything. I don't know what I'm doing here. I know what I'm doing, but I don't know what I'm doing here. All right, let's see if I can get this going. Go, baby. Something happened. I did something wrong. Nothing's happening here. Hello. Just get me to the next slide, maybe. There. Oh, thank you. Oh, this is, again, the geologist and me. This is a geological map of Georgia. Just take it, don't take it easy. Don't try to absorb all this. So the thing called a fall line, very important, because that's where the coast used to be for 30 million years. Okay, anything above that is clay, soils, or rocks. Anything below that is sand. That was all deposited when the sea covered up South Georgia. That's how that was formed. And it tends to be very sandy, especially as you approach the present coast today. And the reason it's called a fall line was the rivers that flowed over those hard soils found soft soil and created waterfalls. They're not like Niagara, but they're 20, 30 feet high, all along the fall line. Okay? But just imagine, so the coastal plain. Now, so what is the deal about the coastal plain? It's big. 60% of Georgia is in the coastal plain. It's a different world, and it's a home to all those coasts that we were just talking about. Now, as the sea level fell, rivers were formed. The rivers, water got to go somewhere. And so now we see a map on the right of all the rivers, major rivers in Georgia. So, what do we want to know about them? I'm going to keep it simple. If you look carefully, there's a pattern. Rivers to the right side of the map flow to the Atlantic Ocean. The rivers to the left side flow to the Gulf of Mexico. What's going on? There's a continental divide there. Boom. You'd never believe it when you're driving down there. It's flat. It runs right through Atlanta, of course. But these rivers. Now, and Okefenokee Swamp's really interesting because of the river that starts there called the Suwannee, and it flows to the Gulf. And it's a river that starts there called the St. Mary's, and it flows to the Atlantic. So the Okefenokee bursts two rivers. So these rivers, what do? When they get to the coast? They bring minerals and nutrients to the saltwater marshes that are there. Salt marshes are not salt marshes. They have to have fresh water or they don't work. So it's all important. So to my way of thinking, the coast of Georgia is all this big stuff. Everything's connected because all of life and movements of all these things, these changes, is connected. Okay. Not working. There we go. So the Smithsonian angle, go to the collections, and you see the time effect on life. So upper slide, up there on the slide, what do you see? Scallops, right? They're 55 million years old. They were found in Georgia from the old coastline. What do you know, when I looked at that, what I thought? That looks like a scallop I picked up on the beach yesterday. Scallops are tough guys. They've been around for 55 million years. Very satisfied in how they look. And they're just comfortable with what they're doing, right? They don't worry about how they look. We worry about how we look, right? Over here in the middle is a shark's tooth, 15 million years ago, 15 million. And it's the biggest shark and fish that ever lived, 60 million megalodon, huge, huge, huge fish. It was so big that it actually went extinct when things really got tough on marine life. But the teeth are still there because it sheds 2,000 teeth a year. And if you get out there and you dig around hard, you go on shark's tooth tours down in Savannah. If you're really lucky, you get a big one. I have a number that friends gave me. I didn't dive to get them. If we go to the right there, that's a mammoth tooth. Oh, I'm sorry, I should say this one came in the collections of Smithsonian from Douglas, Georgia. That's where I grew up. Douglas, Georgia used to be home to the biggest fish in the world. So now they're pretty small. On the right, mammoths. There were mammoths lifting, and that's from Douglas, Georgia. Mammoths trumping around Douglas, Georgia when it was a savanna. Talk about change, right? Woo. Bound here, just looking at the collections as they are today. Those are birds. They have 660,000 birds in the collection. Over 12,000 of them are from Georgia. And most of those are from the coast. And the right-hand side are plants. They have 4,500,000 plants. And many of them are from Georgia. So you learn a lot by going to the collections. All right, I need to go one more. Can we get her going? Good, thank you. I was not, okay. So here's the point. For almost 60 million years, change was instigated by Mother Nature. Mother Nature tends, every now and then can get a little harsh, but Mother Nature moves slowly. You know, the sea level rises, and guess what? The animals get up and move, right? Different than humans when we show up, right? Now, humans showed up supposedly in Georgia 15,000 years ago. We don't quite know. When they first got there, they saw mammoths and mastodons and lions and tigers and bears, and they killed them. By 8,000 years ago, gone. In that era, gone. So then the question is, what happened later? What really happened 300 years ago is ships started arriving on our shore, and global commerce developed. Right? And then finally, power tools. You want to cut some trees down with power tools, you can get a lot more trees cut down. And so humans got here and changed the course of evolution and pushed it very fast, so fast nature could not adapt to it. Nature would adapt to it itself, but it can't. All right, next slide. So all these things are developments, recent developments on the coast. Oh, works. So since humans arrived, species began to disappear. All right. First the megafauna, later wolves, black bears, oysters, alligators, North Atlantic sturgeon, North Atlantic right whales, humpback whales, loggerhead turtles, white pelicans, brown pelicans, bald eagles, red knots, piping plovers, ivory-billed red cricket, and so on, not to be left out. Longleaf, cypress, and live oak forest. The longleaf pines used to go from Texas to Virginia. Only 3% of them are left. And they all got cut down in 100 years. A lot of my relatives cut them down. And everybody thought they would last for everybody, forever. But they don't. Nature can't restore longleaf pines very quickly. They're wonderfully beautiful trees. So humans are an agent of change, big one. Philosopher Wendell Berry, who's a farmer, says it's a rule that people inevitably destroy what they don't understand. When they first see it, they think it's infinite, and they proceed to destroy it. Wallace Stegner, we're the most dangerous species of life on the planet, and every other species, even the Earth itself, has caused, something about that, has caused a, oh, it's following me. This way? Oh, I see, okay. This way? Okay. I can't see that. Anyway, you can read the quote. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Oh, that's done. Okay, but here's what he says. But we're the only species, when it chooses to do so, will go to great lengths to save what it might destroy. And we've been doing that for about 150 years, trying to save the buffalo, trying to save this, trying to save loggerhead turtles, trying to save whales. These are species we destroyed. Trying to save the longleaf pine, we cut it all down. Now we're trying to get it back because it's beautiful. Yeah. So it took me 20-some trips, and Bunny traveled with me on a lot of these trips, meeting interesting people like Carol Ruckteschell, who's been living on Cumberland Island for 40 years. I rode on her ATV, on the back of her ATV, so I could see her museum collection. 1 hour. Ooh. We took kayak trips on the rivers. We went out with Crawfish Crawford, a man who lived on the coast for 50 years and worked and knows everything about it. Almeida, who's doing work on all those mammals and bison and bears and tigers and stuff. Well, their remains are in the deposits. You can see them. And folks like Scott Coleman and Chris Depkin and Abby Sterling, who took us out to see the migratory birds and the water life. And my grandson Carter, I asked him what he wanted to study. He said marine biology. I got him in a sea camp on Tybee Island, and he was telling me stuff I didn't know. And I took him out to Back Beach, and we'd walk around, and I'd see him talking about it. I said, Mark Carter, he said, I always just tell him about the crabs. He's a natural-born educator. All right, don't forget the beauty of the coast. It's a magnificent place, and we've taken so much of it away. And don't ever lose it, right? That's Back Beach, that's Blackbeard Island, Little Cumberland, salt marshes, and the live oaks. I won't go through the detail on these. Every one of these bird species is at risk, mostly because of what we did to them, and we're trying to bring them all back. Up in the top is a red knot. It migrates 18,000 miles a year. 9,000 from the Arctic to Terra del Fuego and back, and stops off on the Georgia coast to refuel. And if we didn't have that, they would disappear. Most beautiful bird in the world, the painted bunting. British herrings almost disappeared because of the fashion thing back in the 1890s. Women like feathers in their hats. They're the rarest egret in America now because of that. So not without the piping plovers and then the great white pelicans. They almost all disappeared. Sea turtles, loggerhead turtles is the primary turtlet nest on Georgia. Well, that's Bunny on Wassaw Island with Chris Carroll and a young lady who's helping. Chris Carroll's been doing this for 29 years. She checks every nest out, how many eggs are in there. She checks them before the hatch, after the hatch. She records it all, sends all the data in every day. She goes out night and day. We went out night and day with her. I couldn't imagine doing it for 29 years. She got down in one nest that was empty, and she reached way down and she said, there's a live one. This little guy, she put it down. It had 360 degrees to choose, and it looked around and headed for the ocean. And I said, could we pick it up and help it? She said, no. It has to do this because 30 years from now, if it's a female, she'll come back to this beach and lay her eggs. Miracle. And they're coming back slowly, slowly, slowly. Eastern indigo snakes coming from South Georgia. The biggest native snake in America, non-poisonous, but I'm very careful when I hold it. And then the alligators almost wiped out. And they came back because of the Endangered Species Act. The North Atlantic right whale is Georgia's state mammal because it was discovered in 1981 that the mothers birth their young here and care for them before they go north again here in Georgia. Didn't know that until then. That is Phoenix, that's in the Smithsonian. They chose one right whale to illustrate in a model what the hugeness of these animals. She had been caught twice by ropes, and you can see those things that almost killed her. 2013, she was last seen with a calf and never seen again. She was killed by a ship strike. This is, help me, not in Phoenix, but Pilgrim. And that's her calf. That calf was born last year. And this picture shows that calf gallivanting with her mother. and the next day it was killed by a ship and buried on Tybee Island. So we are still doing the wrong thing for these animals. Longleaf pine forest ecosystem, one of the most endangered ecosystems in the world. It's a system, not just a tree. It forms an ecosystem that's gorgeous. And you can see the canopy, it's lovely. It's lovely, the canopy, and how beautiful it is when this system is left alone to do its thing. Okay, with that, let's talk about the future. I wasn't going to write this chapter for the book, but I decided I had to. Charting a future. Challenges. Well, there's a lot of rapid development. In some places, loss of population, sea levels rising, increasing severe Hurricane Helene comes storming through at a 5, and it doesn't lose any power. It goes right through Georgia, knocking things all to hell and back. Decreasing forage cover, segmentation in national preserve. 70% of the land in Georgia is privately owned. If you go to California, they got lots of national parks and state parks and county parks. We don't have that. What is needed, I think, a conservation plan. The vision is inspiring. Take advantage of existing land. Workable, can survive change in state leaders. A lot of our governors are environmentally oriented. The next year we're coming along is not. So you get 4 years or 8 years of something, and then the next governor says, I'm doing something else. We need consistency plan. Creates avenues for people to fish and hunt. You can't just isolate things. You got to figure out how to do that, and you can do it. Right? Yellowstone gets 4 million people a year, and it's still a beautiful place. Central Park gets 40 million people a year, and it's still a beautiful place. So, Aldo Leopold, the father of wildlife conservation, says the richest values of wilderness lie not in the days of Daniel Boone, not even the present, but rather in the future. That's what we need to think about. So, we have a lot of things that have been gifted to us. Our wildlife refuges, like the Okanoki Swamp National Wildlife Refuges, wildlife management areas, that are 105 of those that are state-owned and built up in the last 100 years or so. Incentives for landowners to have conservation easements, Nature Conservancy, and Christy and her folks working on Broxton Rocks, places of natural wonder right near Douglas, Georgia, and then the salt marshes are protected. All Georgia's salt marshes are protected. No other state did that. And so 30% of the salt marsh on the Atlantic coast is in Georgia. It's a beautiful thing. That's a good thing. Now let's think about it. Let's think, okay, that's good. Let's think bigger. Suppose you could get on a bike, your family, in Macon, and there was a bike path that went through the Okmulgee Park and on down the river, on down, and there were places all along the way. There were stations, cultural stations, places to stop, camp, fish, look around. There were nature places. And counties can do this. You don't have to do it statewide. And they have in some cases. And you go all the way to the coast, right? Suppose you could start out in Athens and do the same thing and go all the way to the Okanoki Swamp. Sometimes you could do it in a water trail. You could do it. There are river connections, if you made them, you could actually do that. That's what you could do. We can't do that today, but you could. So let's look at what some other states are doing. There's an initiative called 30 by 30. It's an international initiative. Conserve 30% of your land by 2030. California chose to do it, and they are doing it. But California had 20% of their land in conservation to start with. And Gobson National Park, we don't have one. Right? And then a better idea for Georgia is what Florida has done. Yep, 1 minute. So this connects all of the existing natural areas in Florida together with corridors. So animals can move through there. There'll be places for humans to interact. That's a great idea, right? It's 18 million acres worth of land. Now remember, a lot of that land is sitting there already in nature preserves. You don't have to buy it all. They've already done 11 million of it. So in Georgia, what could we do? This is me thinking, plus Christy and a lot of other people threw their ideas in here. Let's get our national park, for God's sakes. And the Okmulgee National Park is the right place to start. Let's expand the protection of the Okanoki. Quit fooling around and let people try to mine. Okay? And then enhance protection for salt marshes. But importantly, link conservation corridors throughout the entirety of the coastal plain. already Christy's going to talk about these connections, and the state action plan calls for something like that. Not my idea, it's about there. The question is, we have to think in terms of millions of acres, not thousands of acres, right? So, let me think of the last one. Daniel Burnham, the great architect, used to say, after he developed the White City, make no small plans, for they have no magic to stir men's souls. Well, this corridor concept is a big idea, and everybody can understand it, because everybody gets a piece of the pie at the end of the day. Everybody who puts something in it can see what they're doing to make a holistic way to save wildlife and our natural environment in Georgia. So do it all right. And Georgia will be seen as a leader in conservation, not a follower. And we are a big, rich state, and our land is disappearing very fast. Save it now while you can. So that's it. Thank you. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clough. So we have about, I think, 20, 25 minutes. I'll kick it off with a couple of questions, and then we're going to go to the audience for questions. So this was a, oops, sorry. Let me do that again. This was a wonderful journey through time and into the future, and it's, we can really feel your love of nature and your rural roots in this presentation. So you've always had one foot in rural Georgia and one foot in global institutions like Georgia Tech and other universities and the Smithsonian. What, in your opinion, what does rural Georgia need from this conversation, a conservation vision, that might not be obvious to researchers sitting here in Atlanta? And how do Georgia Tech researchers and their partners, who come from all over the US and the world and not necessarily from these communities themselves, better understand and serve the needs of rural communities?
Well, good question. There's a lot unsettled in what I just said. Those are just ideas to a certain extent. But there's a lot of substance behind it, a lot of basics on that. No, we know that corridors are a good thing. We know that animals, even if they don't migrate a long way, want to migrate to create genetic diversity. And so putting in corridors makes a lot of sense. And also, if you put corridors over freeways, animals can actually get over a freeway. And they don't get killed, and they don't kill somebody when they do it. There are a lot of these practical benefits. And there's a lot of studies, scientific studies going into really how this works. But you have to apply it on the ground. You have to look at every parcel of land along these rivers that were called corridors by the State Wildlife Action Plan, which is 2025. It's still under review. And they have done a great job. If you go to that website, you can manipulate it in many different ways. And you'll find that every segment along those rivers, where they have the information, they've said, here are endangered plants, here are endangered fish, here are endangered animals. That's all laid out. There's a lot of science behind it. What else has to be put together? I think it's a great target for AI, personally. I think there are people here who could do a lot with that. But the whole idea of putting these things together and what are the optimal ways to do them, there are people who really want to do it. It's amazing to me. People get kind of excited about this because they can see what Georgia could do. Instead of saying, let's save one plot of land, that's a good thing. Don't stop taking care of the turtles. But turtles are just one, thousands of species, right? So how do we take care of all the thousands of species that are in this beautiful place called the coastal plain? I mean, people drive through the coastal plain, Bunny and I just did it. On I-16, you go 90 miles an hour, right? There's stuff out there, but man, you don't see it, right? Unless you get to a rest stop, right? So I think there's a lot of work for scientists and engineers and or people who want to talk how to organize things, how to organize data, how do you present this to the public? How do you present it to a legislator who thinks you're some kind of, tree hugger and you're doing the wrong thing when you say, no, there's economic value here. It's if you had all these things in place, people would be able to, you'd have fishing trips, you'd have fishing charters, you'd have places where they could do hunting, guided hunting, and school children could go. All this could be connected to collections in museums and all across the state, so teachers can access information about every one of these sites. And every one of these, Bunny and I have been to them, they all have different geologic histories. Even though it's all in the coastal plain, it's all different. And you have different species that are rare and treasured, that are going to get lost. I mean, I remember going with Frankie Snow to Broxton Rocks, and he was telling me about some special mosses. There are like 40 or 50 different species there. And I said, where is it? He said, well, you're standing on them. I said, whoops. So, you know, you have to really know and have people who have cared about these things take it. And that all that information has to be taken together. I'm impressed by these AI agents. I mean, when you start asking them questions, they really can help inform things. I don't let them write my books, but they help me a lot with information I want to get. And but the information's got to be good information. Right now, it's not. There's a lot of work to be done. Plus, tying it into the economic value is something Georgia Tech could really do well.
Yeah. Well, my mind goes in two directions. One of them is perhaps let's talk a little bit more about economic value. You said that about 90% of the land is privately owned, right? What kind of challenges and opportunities does that present to your view?
And Christy will talk about that, I'm sure. A lot of people want to do the right thing. I mean, I've been down to South Georgia. I've been to places where families have decided to turn their land over in a conservation easement. And Georgia has a setup for conservation easement. And it takes a tax burden off that land for people if they will protect it for the future. And you don't need to protect everything, but particularly along a river like the Altamaha, protect, you know, I don't know how many, maybe a mile up and a mile up on either side, and that gives a barrier. And that's a very rich area for animals and the creatures to grow. And in addition, it captures some of the sediments that would be harmful before it gets into the river and then flows down the river and pollutes the salt marshes. So it's all connected. And you have to figure out how to work within that context. I think the thing that's missing a little bit here in Georgia is the Department of Natural Resources, which is great. They don't have much technical capability. They're getting more. I mean, the people that monitor birds now have MODIS towers. They can monitor birds flying from the Tierra del Fuego to Georgia and see where they go. But more and more technology needs to play a role in conservation.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that I was thinking, and especially looking at your grandson, when I grew up in Turkey in a city that was basically a concrete jungle, and we had smog in the morning, the bay was polluted. When I took showers, I would break out in red spots, and like this majestic sense of nature, I was deprived of that. And it's just wonderful to see, you know, coming to the US was a real eye-opener for me, that you could have an industrialized nation and you could have, even with everything that disappeared, still the beauty and
well, it is.
Beauty of nature,
you know,
and being able to protect it.
Experience when you get out in nature, you turn into a different person, you know. You sort of let go, you get rid of all the stuff worrying about. You're not watching the news, which is generally depressing.
Which is helpful.
And, but, you know, it really, that's what we found with the national parks. Like, you go to Yellowstone, and 4 million people are going to be going there. But when you walk around and find these places a little bit less populated, it's awesome. It just pervades your soul. I mean, Bunny and I are going on a rafting trip in the fall down the Salmon River. And I've done it, and it absolutely blows your mind, takes you away from all your problems. And that's what it does. It is uplifting. It makes us feel like we're part of something. Otherwise, we're just driving around in our car.
Yeah. Well, I would, I could talk for hours, but I'd like to open it up to the audience if you have questions. And I see someone in the back.
And you will repeat it up. Just repeat the question. Because I don't hear very well.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Dr. Clough. I really enjoyed your presentation. I was wondering if you could speak to how the Chickasaw Nation and other Native groups have been engaged in this conservation work and with the wildlife corridors.
Did you hear? Questions about how, which nation did you say? Chickasaw Nation and other.
I said Chickasaw specifically because you mentioned the Ocmulgee mounds, but other, just the native engagement, especially thinking about vis-a-vis the economic opportunity.
Yeah. Basically, she's asking about native engagement in this particular project, and specifically looking at the economic opportunity that this could bring to Native Americans in Georgia.
Well, so economics work differently in different parts, even of the coastal plain. Because if you move across the state, I grew up in one of the poorest sections, and I say that because it's the sandiest area for farming, and sand don't hold moisture. So those counties are losing population. What's happening is, and I've visited in many cases with the farmers, the older farmers, they say, well, my kids, Dr. Clough, don't want to even do this. And they leave, they're gone, they're in Atlanta, whatever. And so what the big agribusiness is doing, they move in and they buy, 15,000 acres of land or 5,000 acres of land. And they manage that land with one farm manager and a lot of equipment. So you don't need people. So there are counties in Georgia that are losing population. And that's devastating to the schools, it's devastating to the health systems, and a lot of other aspects. It opens opportunities to buy or conserve land, actually. So that's a good side of it. But the people there love nature. They love fishing, they love hunting, and an overlooked area is that area was a rich area for Native American cultures. They don't talk too much about it. I have a friend who found 400 of them and found pottery that's unbelievable, that's 2,000 years old. He doesn't talk about it because arrowhead hunters will go there and rip up the sites. So you have to decide a place you're going to have where you can educate people. Now, my parents grew up in Jeff Davis County, named after the president of the Confederacy, naturally. And it's a small county. It's in an interesting location relative to the rivers. The Altamaha River, which is a very big river, it carries the capacity of the Nile. It's only 137 miles long, but it has no dams on it. It's a natural wonder, and it's formed when two rivers, thank you, I appreciate that. It's formed when two rivers come together, the Ocmulgee and the Oconee. And the places in Jeff Davis County, it's called the Forks. And you have to visit to believe it, that two huge rivers run smack into each other and decide after twirling around to go that way and go to the coast, and that's the Altamaha. But all those rivers are natural wonders, great places for fishing. But all Native American cultures lived all over those places. And Frankie Snow, my friend, showed that. And Jeff Davis County has a little natural history center that's absolutely outstanding. They don't get enough foot traffic because nobody knows about it. But if you had people on bike trips and camping trips and kayaking trips and all that, they'd be coming by. They would stop. And people tell people who are coming down on I-16, you can actually see some local culture that's beautiful and learn about these native cultures and native lives. So those cultures are very rich cultures. There's a lot to say about it. So it's not just the fishing, camping, hunting, it's culture. And a lot of people, there are a lot of artists, Bunny and I know it, they all have these craft shows, remarkable painters and sculptors and folks that are amazing down there. So I think there are opportunities for ecotourism in a big way. 600,000 people visit the Everglades, the Okefenokee each year. I mean, Bunny said to me, I've never gone on a camping trip. I said, well, let's go to the Okefenokee. It was an interesting trip. But I'll tell you what, do it. It's go in the winter, but it is absolutely worth it. It's a glorious place. There are these places in Georgia. So I think you got that. I need more people to think about this than I have. But I think there are opportunities there.
Thank you. Let's take maybe another question or two? We have 5 more minutes.
I think the Mulkey was in the news lately. Can you talk about where they are with that new national park, or what the chances are that it's going to go?
Yeah. So the question is about the Okmulgee Park. It's a historic park, not a national park. It's a national park, but it's called historic. And it doesn't focus on nature. It focuses on the human development. So there is a movement. That park was created by a necessity, and that is the Depression. And so what's happening is they actually drove a train line right through the middle of these mounds. And the people in Macon decided, wow, they're destroying the site. So they went and met with Franklin Delano Roosevelt and said, could you please help us turn this into a protected site, a historic site? And they worked with the Native American Muskogee tribe, and the Creek Indians they're called. And that's the way it got started. And they ended up, the first thing they did was they put in 800 people to do an archaeological dig. That's amazing. It was actually too many people, but it was successful. And so we learned there's incredible culture there that goes back perhaps 18,000 years. But that's just a little piece of it. That culture existed all the way up and down the Okmulgee River and the Altamaha River, and all the way across the other side of the river. We only see one side of it. The other side's just as rich, just not as many mounds, if you will. So the intent is to make this a really expansive park. And so you would have a corridor, a literal corridor, going from Macon all the way down about 50 miles, and you would document all the species and animals and cultures, all the cultural sites that need to be explored along that area to add them to the site. And a simple example is Swift Creek pottery. When they first got into the Okmulgee, they were looking at pottery that was really Mississippian culture. That's about 1,000 years old. And the gentleman who was running it, R.K. Kelly, who was a Smithsonian employee, was wandering around creeks around the site, and he kept seeing different kinds of pottery that were exceptional. And it was a different culture that was 2,000, 3,000 years old called Swift Creek. That's the name of the creek. So there's a lot to be learned outside of that. So that's the idea with the park. Make it much bigger, make it more expansive, make it more accessible. All you can do right now is go to a couple of mounds, and there's a train line going in the middle of it. So make it much more nature-oriented, much larger. Make it that people can get in a kayak and go down and visit different sites and so forth. So where it stands is that everybody in Macon wants to do it, Republicans and Democrats. And there's a new director, a woman who's a Muskogee Indian, is in charge of this idea. Everybody wants it, and Georgia doesn't have a national park. That's a big deal. And it meets all the standards. There's a big document. It meets all the standards for a national park. But as you know, the present environment is not so pro-parks. So it's okay, but all the members of Congress from Georgia, Republicans and Democrats, want it. Who can say? We need it.
Well, I think it's something that we can all help work on. And, I think you've given us a lot to think as well as how we can build on the work that you've done, that so many others around the state have done, to perhaps try to make this a vision that we realize for Georgia altogether.
Thank you.
So thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
And it's been a